So,
One.
so welcome everybody to the Royal Opera House Bridge Open Talk. This is our first one. It's a bit of an experiment, so bear with us as we get to grips with the technology and with the format. I'm Cliff Manning. I'm the communications coordinator for Royal Opera House Bridge. And for those of you who aren't familiar, the Royal Opera House Bridge is one of 10 bridge organisations funded by the Arts Council England. And we particularly work strategically across Hertfordshire, Bedfordshire, Essex, North Kent. And our aim is to connect and nurture high-quality, sustainable cultural learning for all children and young people. So that's our broad remit. Today what we're looking at is around music technology. And there's two things out of the session today. One is to pick up on conversations which started at a music event on Saturday in Medway that was hosted by John and Kevin, and they can say a bit more. And the other is to look at music technology and what role that has on arts entitlement for all children and young people. And the third thing is, does this online connection work? So from a comms point of view at the Royal Opera House Bridge, we're interested in developing more of a peer community, finding ways to bring professionals together and to use technology in new ways to try and support the arts cultural learning community across the region. So hopefully it will be useful, and we'll see where we go, and we'll get some learning from it from there. So it's all very informal, and to kick us off, we'll just start with some introductions. So we've got John Pratty. John, if you'd like to just a little bit about who you are and where you come from and your expertise, if you will.
Hi there. Yes, I'm John Pratty. I've just finished working at Arts Council England as Creative Media Relationship Manager for the southeast of England. I've spent quite a lot of time as a digital producer, digital journalist, editor, but my work at Arts Council has really involved a lot of concentration and effort around digital learning. Interestingly, since leaving Arts Council, I've been working with Ideas Test, who last Saturday I produced a creative music tech event with. I also worked on an Ideas Camp project, which also took place in North Kent, and just after that, a kind of webinar, which was quite an elaborate online production. So I'm really into creative media, I'm into creative tech, I'm into digital learning. I'm also director of a CIC in Eastbourne called Tech Resort, which is a well-established base for YRS Eastbourne, Young Rewired State Eastbourne, which has been going for 3 years. So I've got quite a lot of practice and experience and interest professionally and in a volunteer capacity in digital learning. Over to you, Cliff.
That was great. Thanks, John. Kevin, a quick intro from yourself and a little bit about your music tech.
Hello, I'm Kevin Grist. I've got two hats. Currently also Arts Council England as music RM for music hubs and music. And I'm also a freelance producer for music education, and I'm particularly interested in innovation in music education, making it diverse, looking at ways in which it can become inclusive, accessible. Digital plays a part in that, but it's not the only part, and we can talk more about that. But I think I also am a teacher, so I've got a background of project managing education work and working in disadvantaged settings, and I also helped John produce Soundhack in Medway on Saturday. Over to you.
Yes, that's great. And finally, we've got Michelle, who's also from the Royal Opera House Bridge and a number of different roles as well. So, Michelle.
Hi. Yeah, I'm Michelle. Michelle Gregson. I program manage with Royal Opera House Bridge for North Kent and Medway for some of the week, and the rest of the time I'm an arts education consultant My background is schools and young people, also a teacher, and I'm not a digital expert at all, so I'm quite impressed that I'm even here, kind of in the room, as it were. But I'm really interested in one of my big passions at the moment, I've had for some time, has been youth arts leadership, and really looking at what that is in practice, as opposed to spurious ideas about youth voice or youth-led projects. I think there's a very deep question to be explored, and I think that the tech may well be a route to bypassing the gatekeepers to young people sometimes and giving them a genuine opportunity to lead. So that's kind of where my interest is in this particular event. Yeah.
Well, thank you, everybody. So let's jump into it then. So a quick question then, looking at music tech and arts entitlement. Does music technology help increase access and opportunity for children and young people? And if it does, how does it do that specifically, and how can we do more of that? Anybody, any thoughts initially?
I'll jump in.
Go on, John.
Yeah, I think it does increase engagement. I think music tech, particularly experienced through the platform of mobile. Where's my mobile? Here's my mobile. Music tech experienced through this, using the tools I can access on this, brings culture and creativity right to my fingertips in a place, in a way which many of the other tools and many of the other practices and the places that some people have to go to experience culture, it's much better than that.
But you could, if you had a trumpet, you could make music. It's a handheld device for making music, is it not?
How much trumpets are?
Well, a recorder then, or
no, this is about many different kinds of tools, many different kinds of cultural and creative experiences, and many different kinds of technology. So it could be about music making, it could be about film, it could be about writing, it could be about recording sound, it could be about taking photographs. Now, for me, this is a gateway to future creativity, and I think that music tech in particular is a great opportunity to engage young people in a way that some of the other practice areas or artistic practices, they may not see that as being immediately engaging to them.
That's a good point. Kevin, have you any thoughts?
I do. I think one of the first thoughts is to go back to young people and try and identify with them. I do think digital music technology does increase access. But I think we need to go further than that and understand that this is a young person's world, and often the gatekeepers of money, the project managers, the youth workers, the teachers. I don't think we appreciate that young people are really emotionally connected to technology, to social media, to comments, posts. It's their world, and sometimes we look at it and think, really? And actually, I think we often need to just look at it and accept that it's not our world necessarily, but it's theirs, and then that's the starting point in which we then design our learning programs around.
Is there a danger though that is it just about consumption now? So obviously we can access lots of music, you can find everything, you can share music that already exists with others, but how are young people moving from consuming to making, what role can we support that in some way, or does it not matter? Does it matter if they're just consuming?
I think it does matter, and I don't think it is just about consumption. I think the difference between when John's holding up the phone and you say what's the difference between a trumpet is, for me, is the learning that it's opened up through digital connection. Where are young people learning a lot of these skills? It's not through a traditional teacher-student relationship, and that's very exciting. It's quite scary as well if you're a teacher, and if you're somebody who's charged with ensuring that standards are maintained. But that's very, very exciting, that sort of peer-to-peer passing on of knowledge and development of creative thinking.
So that brings us on to another point which someone raised earlier, was about the new tools. But is the role of a teacher facilitator, how important is that? Is that still required? Is there still a role in terms of a mediator in that way, or is it not required in the same way, or is it a different role, and how is it different?
Yeah, I think that teachers are absolutely vital in this process. If you don't have, if it's basically a free-for-all, if it's here are the same tools for everyone, everyone can join in, everyone's voice is equal, everyone has the same amount of confidence, then perhaps that might work. But we all know that individuals start from completely different places for all sorts of reasons to do with culture and deprivation, good fortune, goodness knows what. When I was 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, I was incredibly blocked and unable to communicate. And I needed a teacher to get me out of that place. And teachers, I mean, these days in code clubs, for example, you often see groups of young boys sharing culture. We're finding it very difficult to get girls to take part in that culture or to be in that space. And it really, at that point, it needs a guiding hand, it needs a facilitator. Digital culture isn't a level playing field, and in a learning context, I think it really does need the expertise and sensitivity and diplomacy of a teacher to help that to happen.
Yeah, I think it's not a level playing field. And maybe the role of the teacher has changed from traditional ways. I think that's something we've seen. Is that something that you've seen, Kevin, in the work that you've been doing, and how is that changing?
Yeah, definitely. I think when we talk about music tech specifically, I think we need to understand the process by which young people learn music, what we mean by musical skills and musical learning. And I think technology can often play a part in particular genres, contemporary pop, electronic dance music, hip hop, but it's also something around the kind of technical approach that we use, or the process that we use to create music. So I think digital cuts across. It is genre specific, and then it isn't as well, because you can apply it to classical music. It cuts across a lot of things. I think the way that people learn music is that they respond to some kind of stimulus. So it's either they're inspired by something they see, they go and see something, they have a teacher or instructor, but that teacher and instructor is changing because they can go online to YouTube and watch an e-learning video to learn an instrument or how to do something technical. I think also there's this whole new creative industry, which it's still relatively new, which is the kind of what I call supporter roles around music, which is the technicians and it is the engineers and the stage and lighting setups and all those kind of technical things that also involve digital and the kind of the exciting potential around there as well. So if you unpick it, it's quite broad, and so I think when we say digital music technology, we probably need to kind of understand that it is very broad. We can't generalize it, but at the same time it cuts across a lot of things as well. So
it's a really good point about the classical music and various other things, because it can be seen as just a particular side.
Yeah.
Different instruments or different approaches. So is there a need for a skills? Is there a confidence within the adults who are facilitating this? Is there a confidence there to be able to support? If you're a classically trained music teacher, how confident are most teachers to bring in technology into that? And then equally, is there confidence within someone who's used to using Ableton and making genre specific to broaden that out and to teach classical music or bring that kind of culture into it as well?
I suppose I think where does your peripatetic teacher teaching trumpet taking young people through the grades sit within this digital landscape.
It's a good point, and I think I've had endless conversations with organisations such as Audioactive about, we've got grading systems and academic measurements for classical music and for a whole range of instruments, actually rock and pop instruments as well. But when you go to things like electronic dance music and hip hop and rapping and all the kind of things that cut into digital in a genre specific way, and then things like Sonic Pi and Makey Makey and all those kind of things which are all cutting edge, there is no read across to grades. There doesn't. I'm not saying there has to be, but there is no kind of academic currency yet where we can read across and say, actually, if you've got a grade 9 in that, it equates to a grade 9 in that. And that might be an issue in terms of us recognising the rigour that some of these artists, these electronic and digital artists, have as well. And it feels like that still when we're measuring.
Yes, the quality question starts to come up, I suppose, in different perceptions of it. But yeah, the idea of grade 8 in Sonic Pi is quite interesting, isn't it? It's kind of,
well, hang on a minute, it's not impossible.
No, not impossible at all. It's probably going to happen sooner than we think.
But that's like, of course, there are individual platforms and tools that people will spark up about and become virtuoso in. But there's also a whole series of people who are not necessarily using individual skills and individual tools to create individualistic creative pieces. There are people who are using platforms to orchestrate the work of others. And we've seen, I mean, God, we've had 25 or 30 years of DJ culture, but when that started, I thought, well, hang on, these people are just using the work of others to orchestrate an audience and a moment and some, a performative experience. And we've really come on since then. There are all sorts of people making all sorts of cultural experiences from a range of different things, and many of them are musical, and those would be impossible to fit into a grading system or Arts Award or Arts Mark or goodness knows what.
Yep.
And yet they are still valid cultural experiences. So we've got people, I mean, the question actually about how teachers, what is the position of a teacher, if you transpose that across to the museum experience, museum curators now are getting fairly confused about what their role is when culture is going online, museum collections are going online, and museum collections are being commented on, and new labels for objects are being added to online collections by members of the public. So curators are finding it increasingly difficult to use their original skill set around curation, and they're having to develop a whole new set of skills around mediation and diplomacy and choosing platforms and narrating a discussion and helping others talk about stuff in ways which they may not have been able to do. It seems to me that digital platforms around music and some of the new tools that we're using allow us to do that too. So it's a kind of, it's what people in museum culture call open authority, which is very interesting because it implies open culture. So I think there is something there that we can take in terms of music tech, and digital music culture.
Yeah, it's a very good point. I like that phrase, open authority. I think it's quite nice. It's got a nice idea to that. It's tap into, Michelle, your interest particularly in terms of sort of peer-to-peer young people, making that transition from being a maker to being a leader to them actually, to the young people.
And what their relationship is with experts of practice and how they relate to them. I think, John, that comparison with museums is a fantastic one, and actually very apposite for Medway, because with the 100 objects that made Medway programme that's kicking off, that's exactly the dilemma that those museum curators are facing. And the dialogue that will ensue between the curating teams, the learning teams, teachers and young people is going to be really interesting to see how they negotiate the different roles, and they're going to shift, they're going to have to shift. And I think that's the bottom line. It's new territory for lots of people, but it does shine a light on areas of sort of blockage that stop things moving forward and continue cycles where young people can't access certain art forms. And that was our original question. Will it increase access? And I think yes, but we have to kind of really explore those questions about who owns what and what different people's roles are within that.
But it raises the question: is it access for all, or is it just more for the same groups?
Yeah.
Is there any evidence that you can see from the work that you've been doing with music technology that it's broadening access and bringing in a more diverse group to engage with arts and culture, or is it fancier tools or new tools for the usual suspects? Kevin,
can I say something?
Yeah.
There was a digital R&D fund forum in Manchester, January or March 2014. It was a fascinating meeting. On the stage was Paula Ledieu, who at that point was one of the principal digital learning people at Mozilla. And Paula talked about culture sector and the kinds of objects and kinds of content that the culture sector is aiming at the general public, this massively online general public. And she used this phrase, quotable culture. She talked about quotable culture. She suggested that the culture sector is not producing quotable culture of the sort that young people steal, remake, copy, mash, change. We're not producing in general as a culture sector the kind of stuff that people all around the world on their mobiles are, corrupting, breaking, remaking. And until as a culture sector we start to make that kind of stuff which could be shared or just punted out there on YouTube and lost forever and discovered by someone else, until we start to do that, we're not really engaging in this massively much more popular kind of digital space which is out there. And it's a great phrase, quotable culture. It's, we're not producing it.
So how do we make steps towards doing that? How do we make sure that there is access for everybody and everybody can?
I think there is looking out at the kind of conversations that have been occurring across the culture sector across the world, particularly in America and in the Far East, in some museum conferences. People are talking. People freely and often use their culture and their lingua franca is open. They talk about openness. They talk about networked culture. They talk about stuff that's shareable, stuff that's copyright free, stuff that's this kind of stuff.
Are you saying we need to do more of that?
Not like that.
Is it that we need to do more of that within music education, or is it there's across the board? But is there specific things we could do within music learning? I don't know, Kevin, have you seen any evidence of or example of the tools, the music tech that enables that to happen in a more interesting way?
Yeah, I mean, off the top of my head, there's certainly lots of freeware you can download now, or open source.
Sonic Pi is free,
such as Sonic Pi. There was also stuff like, and I think it was when I used to work at a youth centre in Brighton years ago, and I knew John then. I think there was a project where there was almost like a collection of old used smartphones, and they were being collected by the digital sector, and they were then being redistributed or loaned out to schools and groups to use to do things like coding and like music tech and stuff. So where I worked in a deprived estate in Brighton where there is potentially low access to digital tech, and not everybody's got an iPhone. I think I'm just reading the stat here, almost half the people in social housing, for example, don't have access to the internet, and that was a stat just last year. So we can't assume that everybody is on the same playing field here, and we have to come up with ways in which we can recycle, reuse, have open source stuff that's accessible, and not just in schools, but in youth centres, in libraries, and Wi-Fi spots, all those kind of things that we need to move towards to be having a more open online society, because it is all online. That's the thing. You have to have some sort of access to the internet.
So cost is definitely coming down. I know at the SoundHack event on Saturday, the young man was asking about the Sonic Pi thing, and it seemed like it was going to be really expensive when he was asking, and it was £70 for the device or £50 or something, which is still it's not totally affordable for everybody. But thinking back, when I was a teenager, in terms of music making software and computers was just out there. It was something you would have to go to a very special place to be able to access, and there's obviously still that level. So yeah, that open access and the technology, and I suppose that I've got a particular interest in how arts can drive some of this digital making side of things to that open source, and people are making, if you're playing Sonic Pi, making music Sonic Pi, you can actually start to get into the code and make it better for someone else to do, so it can lead from one thing to another.
It feels like it takes us back to John's point right at the beginning about the need for teachers to manage the process of learning, because actually what Kevin describes there and makes me think that actually digital could be a means of exclusion much more than when kids could just pick up a guitar. And in fact, schools are the places where they can get access to the internet. Definitely. So teachers in schools have to be supportive of that process. They've got to be part of it, not left behind, not excluded, not disempowered. So the gatekeepers are still required.
Yeah, it's a good point in terms of if everything's going digital and you don't have access to digital, you're extra excluded now in terms of there's a statistic, 98% of job applications are done online. If you can't get online for different reasons, you're not able to use some of the tools, or you don't have the skills, then you're disproportionately disadvantaged in that sense.
Yeah.
So there was an interesting point just coming to wrap up, was about, in terms of what you were saying, John, what the museum sector was experiencing in terms of the role of the curator, and that sort of going from a closed and open, and the open authority and the quotable culture. Is there learning that we can do across sectors, between music, between museums, and what would that look like if we were to do that? So one of the things as a bridge organisation that we want to do is to support that kind of cross-sector networking between organisations, whether it's in a place or cross-sector. So what might that look like if we were to learn from each other?
I think at this stage it's wishful thinking, Cliff. At this point, this discussion about the phrase open authority is largely a kind of a research conversation. I'm involved with the Digital Public Space Forum, which is one of two groups of people getting together to talk about what a digital public space is like and what the behaviours are like within that place. And there is a BBC project called the Research Education Space, and in that context, in that project, they are seriously starting to think about what it's like if schools have open and constant and full access to online collections, and what that means for schools and curators and museums and the curator's authority. But at this stage, it's early days, and if you went to a local museum in Maidstone or Rochester and asked them if you could talk to someone at the front desk about open authority, they'd probably pick the phone up to the police really quickly.
I was just thinking about Kevin's point earlier about how digital is cross-cutting across genres.
I completely agree.
And how it's changing the role within it. And that's the same not just for music tech, but it's also for literacy and for,
I completely
physical
agree.
activity and stuff. So there's lessons across in terms of how we react to new digital tools.
I think it really challenges. It does really challenge many people involved in the culture sector to begin thinking about how they produce and create and how they relate to audiences. I think we've got a big job as cultural creators to understand that our roles might be shifting, whatever our practice area. So it's no longer one-to-many broadcasting. It might be many-to-many, or group-to-group, or child-to-child, or it's completely different as a set of cultural opportunities now, and it's very exciting.
Kevin, you get any thoughts on that in terms of cross-sector lessons that we might learn and how we might similarities?
Well, I think the other thing that springs to us, because it's not, it doesn't then mean we have to be educated in set age groups as well, and it's completely borderless in terms of country, potentially in terms of age group, in terms of different abilities. And I think that's a really exciting but also very dangerous thing, like John was saying, about how you plan for that kind of thing and how you measure how you measure progression, for example, or how someone's progressed from the starting point to the end when everyone's starting at different points or different systems. So it's really interesting. The point I wanted to make was around going back to, we were talking about skills of teachers. We didn't really quite touch on it, and just from my experience of music hubs and talking to hubs and music services, there's a huge skill gap in those contemporary genres that use digital. There's a huge skill gap in the use of digital technology, and they know it, and they admit it. Teachers admit it. They want more CPD and they want more training. But it does create a huge issue around diversity. If teachers don't have the right skills to deliver the stuff that young people are doing already, and trying to direct them or co-learn with them in the right ways, then we have an issue in the education system if teachers don't have the right skills. And I just want to make that point. It's a really important point, and I think it's an issue about diversity more than anything, and quality in the education system.
I think that's very true, and I suppose it's how we can, what role we can all play to support that skilling and to enable teachers to develop that confidence. I'm particularly interested in that peer-to-peer connection, so hopefully we can, some of these discussions we can reach out to more people, because we know getting out of school is tricky, so in terms of CPD, and supporting where there is good practice is certainly something that the bridge organisations want to do, and it's something which we're keen to do. So I'm just thinking in terms of wrapping up, I think there's a really some final thoughts from everybody in terms of going back to our initial question, and with the discussion around skills and cross-cutting and how we can learn that open sense and how we apply that. So, in terms of music technology, is it a way in which we can increase access, and are we seeing some good examples of that happening already locally? Just a couple of words, or any other points you have to make?
I think that I'd like to pick up on one last thing Kevin just said. At the Music Tech Day that we did on Saturday at Chatham at the University of Kent Music School, Ross Wilson from Sonic Pi said exactly the same thing that Kevin just said. In fact, someone from the attendees, in fact you were there, Cliff, one of the attendees said, how do I, if I'm at school now, how do I study music tech? Can I study music tech? Where should I go to do it? And Ross said, well, you can't actually. It's not in the curriculum. There's nowhere you can go. If you actually wanted to study music tech, the first place that you might be able to do it is at university. You'd have to go off and find a university music department that does it, and there you can study it. So to me, in terms of accessibility and engagement and digital as a platform for young people to engage, it's all there. Young kids are using it. People are creating culture on it. You can go online and find it all around you. But it's about time that we started to put our minds to trying to find ways of getting the curriculum to engage with it. For culture sector people, I think there are lots of opportunities to come up with grants for the arts ideas or creative ideas involving artistic commissions involving culture and technology and music. There's plenty of room for us in the culture sector to come up with ideas like that. But it is a bit of a it's certainly a situation we find ourselves in, and I guess that with funding for education and curriculum changes happening all the time and diminishing all the time, it's not going to be easier to access learning around music tech in schools. It feels like it's getting harder.
It's a bit of a strange situation. We're teaching coding at year 8, but not music tech, in which Sonic Pi you can do what you can actually do with the coding to make
That's
the
really
music.
interesting. Yeah. So everybody, the government particularly, is crazy about kids learning coding, but
For
at the
what
same
end?
time, we can't get them to fund more access to music tech.
Yeah. We seem to have lost Michelle. I think her phone battery is gone. So, Kevin, any thoughts on that?
Yeah, just a few things. I think we were talking about this today at Arts Council, funny enough, around how the curriculum really does need to engage with arts more and more now, especially as schools aren't being measured as much, and Ofsted isn't measuring as much on the arts curriculum. I think there's a whole kind of thing around cross curriculum, around how we use things like Sonic Pi to engage with maths and science and technology. There needs to be more measures in place, so schools know that by doing that it also engages in arts and recreational stuff. I think also, just going back, this is a different point altogether, but just going back on the way we use musical technology for making and creating music, and we kind of touched on that as well. From my experience, there's a lot of individual bedroom musicians who go online, who watch YouTube, who create stuff in Logic or play a guitar in the bedroom and record that. What technology can do in terms of, if you come back to this access and issue, what it can do is it can enable individual musicians, this is a really particular point, to engage with others and to collaborate, and not just online, but actually it just enables them through technology to do more interesting stuff with their sort of their instrument of choice with a group of others. But I don't think still we've fully explored how that works. So, for example, if we've got orchestras that have been running for hundreds of years, but what does a digital ensemble look like? Does an iPad? Should there be an iPad section in a classical orchestra now? Because should these things evolve? And these are all kind of questions that are being tested, and there's lots of research and development at the moment, but nobody's got a definitive answer, and not they necessarily shouldn't have. But I think what it does is it opens up all these possibilities that we've never been able to kind of it's sped up. If you look at the kind of the development of music and instruments and performance, it's been like this, and in the last few decades it's gone like this. And I suppose you could say that about all the art forms, but it's just the possibilities are endless now, I think.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point. I think the idea of an iPad section in an orchestra, and if you're a bedroom musician and your other friends are musicians, but they go to the Saturday orchestra, and where do you go? So it's interesting. I think we should probably wrap it up there, unless somebody else has got anything else to add at this stage. Obviously, there's lots more. We've only touched on so many different topics in terms of access, in terms of openness. Teacher skills is clearly a huge and confidence within that as well, to be able to really reflect the communities that we're serving as well, and being able to ensure that there is that level playing fields across them. And so that idea of bringing up the accreditation between digital skills to be a grade 8 piano and an iPad section within an orchestra, youth orchestra or something, is quite steps towards that. So there's lots more to discuss, and hopefully we'll be able to continue some of these discussions in future open talks. Just to say thank you to John and to Kevin and Michelle. Unfortunately, Steph Fuller, who was going to join us, is stuck on a train somewhere in the heat. The train lines are buckling somewhere, I think. So, but this is, I think it's the start for many conversations, and hopefully we can continue them online and in future talks as well. So, unless any other final words, so thank you very much, and look forward to having more open talks in the future. So it's